All right, live here on YouTube, and we're live here on Facebook as well. Welcome into DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, although this is obviously not a podcast, but we're still presented, as always, by our friends at Merriweather and Tharp here today. And don't forget that we will have a podcast version of our show in just a little bit. So we'll kind of get into the news of the day there. We'll talk to Connor Riley. Really good interview with Connor today, touching on a number of subjects. That was really fun. You can hear that in its entirety on the podcast version of DawgNation Daily here today. And, of course, at 3 p.m. this afternoon, we'll do a Cover 4 live through the magic of video capabilities. Myself, Jeff Sintel, Mike Griffith, the entire DawgNation team will all get together today and talk some Georgia football with you a little bit later on this afternoon. I am really looking forward to all of that. I will say that our buddy Eddie is here today. He is raring to go and ready to have a good time. I'm glad to have all of you with us here today as well. And, of course, we will talk about whatever you want to talk about in the comment section. And I'll also give you a little bit of a taste and a hint of what's coming up on the podcast today. I thought that Cole Kubelik, our buddy from the SEC Network, also a radio host on WJOX, was on another radio station here this week. And he was talking about Scott Cochran, had some pretty provocative statements to make about how, even though some Alabama fans have downplayed Cochran's departure from Tuscaloosa, that he believes this is the biggest loss thus far in the Nick Saban era. That's a bigger loss for Saban than anything that's happened up until this point in time. And I'll play some audio for you on the podcast today of what Kirby Smart said about Cochran when he met with the reporters a little earlier this week. I mean, ultimately, my takeaway on the Cochran hire and what Nick Saban didn't see in Cochran, what Kirby Smart apparently does. And by the way, nice to have Memphis Dog checking in on the show today over here on Facebook. Jan Armistead checking in. Jan, it's good to be able to see you today here as well. You know, when this news first came out on this show, I said, to me, this is a bad look for Saban. It makes him seem like an ungrateful boss that he didn't make room for a guy like Scott Cochran to grow and develop in his organization, essentially put a cap and a ceiling on how high he could climb in the organization. That's not the kind of boss anybody wants to work for. And if you work for a boss like that who has put a lid on your ability to achieve and succeed, my suggestion for you would be to go find employment somewhere else, or at least start looking for employment somewhere else. And that's exactly what Scott Cochran ultimately did. Now, when it comes to Kirby Smart and what he looks for in assistants and the assistants that he's hired, and what Nick Saban looks for in assistants and the assistants that he's hired, I think it is very fair to say that Kirby Smart has just been better at that at recent years than what Nick Saban has been. Go back and look at the way in which Tosh Lupoi was scapegoated for the 2018 national championship loss to Clemson. Look at the way that Pete Golding came in place of Lupoi, was supposed to be an upgrade, and yet Alabama fans. I mean, don't take my word for this. Talk to Alabama fans. Sometimes they join us on Facebook. Sometimes they join us on YouTube. Ask them what they think about Pete Golding. And most times, Alabama fans won't give you a very favorable review of how Golding has performed as defensive coordinator. Well, ask Georgia fans how they feel about Dan Lanning. Lanning was an unknown when he was hired as a assistant coach at Georgia a couple of years ago, and now as a defensive coordinator making more than $1 million, $1.25 million, I believe it was reported this week. Ask Georgia fans how they feel about Lanning. They feel pretty good all the way around, and that's the kind of assistant coaching hire that, for the most part, Kirby Smart's been making. Now, you can say that promoting James Coley to offensive coordinator didn't necessarily work out. If you said that, you'd probably be right. But overall, Kirby Smart's got a pretty good batting average right now when it comes to picking assistants. So if Saban says, I don't think Scott Cochran's got what it takes to be an on-field coach, if Kirby Smart says, yeah, I've worked this guy, I think he can be an on-field coach and a good one right now, at least over the last couple of years, when it comes to who picks the best assistants, I think you can make a case that's been Kirby Smart. Now, that's no substitute for actually beating Nick Saban on the field. No one will say otherwise. But Saban's opinion about who is and who isn't a good assistant coach, we see lots of examples in the recent past that maybe Saban's tuning fork on stuff like that isn't quite as tuned in as he thinks it should be. So we can talk a lot about that. We can also take a lot of your comments here. Worm says, where the dog fans at? They are right here today on DawgNation Daily, presented by Merriweather and Tharp. Of course, we appreciate Merriweather and Tharp making all this possible. I'll get my Merriweather and Tharp logo and graphic and get ready to go on that in a moment. I've told you that my kids have been, the character from Frozen. My daughter has taken balloons and basically traded Elsa's, those of you that like Charlotte and Becky Lynch and all the lady superstars in the WWE. My daughter has turned Elsa into the next WWE superstar. So good for her on that. She gave it to me as a gift for April Fool's Day yesterday. So that was really fun. Memphis Dog on YouTube says, Kirby's worked with Cochran for a long time. He knows his value. And I think that's true. And I think, unfortunately, one of the things you say about Nick Saban, one of the reasons why, as I've said before, Saban's obviously a great coach. Sometimes I'm questioning whether or not Saban's actually a good guy. And one of the reasons why I question that is because having had a chance to work with Scott Cochran side by side all of those years as well, it almost seems like as if Saban didn't notice the value of Cochran. Even though we've had guys like Mike Johnson, other former Alabama players who've told us that he was instrumental to the program's success, it's almost like Nick Saban didn't see it or choose to ignore it, maybe because he didn't want the credit to be dispersed among other people other than himself. So I think the entire way in which the Scott Cochran thing has played out at Alabama has been a bad look for Saban, and it's a vulnerability that a program like Georgia can exploit. Now, simultaneous to Georgia trying to exploit that, you also have programs like LSU, the reigning national champion, trying to do that. Auburn, which has done something that Georgia has not been able to do, get a head-to-head win over Nick Saban in recent years, a couple of them in Auburn's case. There were other programs trying to exploit this. But Nick Saban's stinginess with credit and promotions and things like that here at the end of his career, that's an opportunity for programs to exploit. Margaret Brooks says that I'm breaking up. I apologize for that. I hope that's not going to be a problem. Worm says, thanks for the shout out. Guess I got here early. Yeah, I try to give everybody as many shouts out as I can. JT Thompson checking in as a beardless dog in Cumming, Georgia. Well, listen, you know, some people like the beard, some people don't. I'm actually kind of getting used to mine a little bit more. I may never shave this thing now. I'm kind of getting used to it here at this point in time. What else is going on? It says that it sounds like the YouTube stream's pretty good so far today. Frank Patterson says, we offered a 4-star Jaden Lucas the other day out of Greenville, South Carolina. Any word on him? Always good bringing those Carolina dogs. Yeah, I totally agree with that. Carolinas have been good to Georgia over the years. And I did see where a flurry of offers had recently gone out. And nice to see the recruiting work continuing to go unabated, even though obviously those face-to-face visits aren't very much in vogue right now. It's nice to see the recruiting work of Georgia be able to continue. Jennifer Caldwell-Sperlin says the sound is awful this morning. James Fulgham says that I'm breaking up. Can't understand you. Choppy audio. Is it on my end? I wonder what's causing that. Sorry. I'm sorry, y'all. I hope that's not a problem. Sounds like a couple people are seeing that on Facebook, but I'm not honestly sure what's causing that. George says the audio is breaking up. I don't know about that. I guess try to stay patient with me here for a second. We'll see if this is going to work its way out. Maybe I'll have to get back out and get back in or something like that. Q says the reason why the Facebook audio is breaking out is because Facebook is weak. I don't know. Robert Jose also saying the audio is off a little bit. Maybe this is on Facebook's end. I know sometimes, you know, Facebook is a little bit of an issue, but it sounds like a lot of folks are pretty well dealing with that over there on the Facebook side. So I really apologize for that. I hope everything is okay. It does look like the YouTube is fine. So if you're having trouble on Facebook, DawgNation on YouTube, you can join us live over there. If you're having an issue, I'd love to have you do so if you can. Yeah, so I apologize. Brad Hotton asking about Eddie. Eddie is right here, Brad. He's ready to go. It's almost like you can sit him right here and kind of get him up and running. Q says no Facebookers allowed over on YouTube. That's not nice. Come on now. That's not nice. Let's see what else is going on here. Dark Brooks checking in on YouTube from Facebook. Thanks for making the way over. I appreciate that. Mike D laughing about all the top fans over on Facebook. Yeah, so sorry y'all having some trouble with that. Bob Hayes checking out a couple different platforms. I appreciate that. So it sounds like Matt Talley's found a solution. Hope you guys are okay on that. Good to see Matt Rukavina checking in. Let's see what else is going on over here. We'll try to take a few more comments. Idea. Matt Rukavina says that I'm better now in the audio. That's good to hear. I just think that noticeable features are probably pretty good all the way around, right? It's kind of nice to be noticed. So yeah, I'm kind of okay with that. I'm okay with that. I mean, otherwise, when I'm just like regular short, and by the way, the thing you should really pay attention to is not the beard. You should really pay attention to how long the hair is getting. I mean, the hair is really, really getting long. That's what you should be noticing. But if I have regular short hair BA and regular clean shaven BA, I'm at that point in time just sort of a regular looking dude. I look like everybody else that you see. So having a feature that's relatively noticeable is probably not a bad thing all the way around. Bob Garrison checking in on both platforms. Listen, we'll take it. These days we'll take every click we can get, Bob. I'm not going to lie to you. All right, let's do a few more here. Hunter Davis says it's the good old competition between UGA YouTube and UGA Facebook. Yeah, I'm fine with that. This is sort of like our version of YouTube versus Facebook is the closest thing we're going to get to a G-Day this year. There is no inter-squad scrimmage among Georgia football, so we may have to do like an inter-squad scrimmage among the YouTube folks. And by the way, and the Facebook folks, by the way, speaking of that, today, 3 p.m. Eastern time, on the DawgNation YouTube page, we're going to do Cover 4 live. All the DawgNation folks, Jeff, Mike, Connor, me, we're going to be live on video together today at 3 p.m. on YouTube. So please join us for that. That's going to be a lot of fun, and it'll eventually be on Facebook. It's just that when we're not in our studio, it's very hard to stream to both places at the same time, especially when we're all of us together like that. So we'll be on YouTube first. We'll be on Facebook after that. So by the way, look who's here today. Jeff Sintel says he can hear me great on Facebook. So good to know, and good to see Jeff here. By the way, Jeff had a great edition of Before the Hedges presented by Kroger last night. David Daniel, the very good defensive back in the class of 2021, stopped by to join Jeff on that. So Jeff's work is continuing here, full steam ahead. A great edition of the program last night with David Daniel. If you, for normally a YouTube viewer, if you go to the and I think it's on YouTube now too, but either way, YouTube, Facebook, whatever else, you can see the David Daniel interview with Jeff Sintel and see Jeff's comments and thoughts on UGA recruiting. So please make sure you check that out. It's great to have Jeff as part of the show here today. Let's see whatever comments we got going on here. Football fan over here on YouTube says the beard matches me. I should never shave. Honestly, as I said before, I'm kind of getting into it now. I'm starting to enjoy it here a little bit. I'm kind of enjoying that. Somebody said that YouTube would be a 7-point favorite over Facebook in kind of a G-Day style scrimmage. That's pretty funny. Winston Mock says Eddie needs a beard too. Yeah, one of the things I thought about doing is like trying to find one of my daughter's dolls and like cutting some of the hair off and using that to make Eddie a beard. She'd be very mad if I probably did that. But nonetheless, Bobby Bryan checking in, always serving those veterans down there in Hudson, Florida. Bobby, thanks for doing that. Mickey Brady checking in from Pearson, Georgia, still grading those roads. But with the shutdown coming, he says they're probably about to shut us down on that. I am sorry to hear that. I know a lot of you have a work situation that's uncertain right now. And so you got a lot to think about. So the fact that you'd spend some of your downtime relaxing with us is certainly an appreciation for me here. Josh Moynihan says that ESPN projected Georgia's defense to be in the best shape of anyone for the next 3 years. Tough to argue for anyone else. Yeah, Josh, I agree. And obviously a lot of that's got to do with the talent that's been amassed there. And I think it's going to be even interesting when you start fast-forwarding ahead of the 2021 class as well. Because really last year was not a heavy defensive class for Georgia, other than trying to bring in some big-time defensive backs. Georgia only signs the one linebacker, small number of defensive linemen. Georgia had more needs on offense than it had on defense. But in terms of those future defensive rankings, adding to that is the work that's going to happen with this 2021 class, where there will be a lot of defensive names included. My thought here is the 2021 class for Georgia is going to be heavily leaned in the direction of defense. When you're thinking about future defensive rankings, you think about the 2021 class helping to supplement that. And it's pretty clearly that Georgia's got a brand, and I think it's a good one, as a defensive-minded program. Now, you've got to be better offensively to win a national championship, what Georgia has been. But when you see ESPN, and they do these things from time to time, their future position group rankings, future program rankings, they do it for a lot of different position groups. But it's nice to have a brand, the same way that some of y'all said, hey, we can recognize you now because of your beard, that's your brand. It's not a bad brand for Georgia to say, hey, when you play Georgia, you're going to face a tough defense. Now, you got to have more than just a tough defense. But there are a lot of programs that don't really have an established brand one way or another, and they're obviously middling because of that. So from Georgia's standpoint, it's kind of nice to be known for something. This is a little bit of an inside joke, but I think it's really funny. So there's a guy that comments on Facebook. His name's Shelton Tucker, and I can't tell if Shelton's thing is a work or if it's real, but he's always trying to get people stirred up. And a lot of times it's related to quarterbacks. One of our Facebook commenters, Matt Talley, said if Shelton went to YouTube, he'd be the commenter. That is a very, very inside joke, but it's pretty funny all the way around. And Shelton's a good sport, so I'm sure he'll take that well. Chip Gromlich brings up a pretty good idea. I should wear a UGA helmet and face mask so I'll quit touching my face during the show. Yeah, it is true. Like, there are certain things that I'm really good at. Like, I wash my hands 1,000 times a day. Before the coronavirus, I washed my hands 1,000 times a day. I was probably training for the coronavirus for years. I mean, I'm a hand washer, not because I'm a germ freak. I just like to wash my hands. So I've always been good at the hand washing. I've said before, I'm like a weird dichotomy because on the one hand, I'm fairly laid back, but if you're ever with me, I'm always bouncing around and doing all the kind of stuff. I can't sit still for 2 seconds. And a lot of facial touching or something. Like, it really is. The worst thing you can do is eyes. That's what I do. I rub my eyes a lot. Awful, 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 awful. Rodney McCray Stud still says, so ready to get back to UGA football. Yeah, with that in mind, I talked yesterday on this show and on our subsequent podcast about the fact that Steve Spurrier said that, hey, listen, not having spring practice won't be that big of a deal. These guys can get out there and play. A couple of coaches have sort of echoed something similar to that. Eli Drinkwitz, the Missouri coach, who you probably couldn't pick out of the lineup. Certainly I couldn't until recently. Drinkwitz said that he felt like if they were back on campus by August 5th, they could play a game on September the 5th or September the 7th, whatever their first game is. That you give them a month, they can be ready to go. It's coaches like that we've got to really laud and compliment because, some of these people who are, so hesitant to commit to being back on the field, playing in some form or fashion, assuming that the world is healthy come that time, those are the people that we've got to argue against that, right? I thought that Sam Pittman as well, who goes on an Arkansas radio station and basically can't even consider the possibility of there not being football. We need the optimism of Pittman. We need the practical motivation of a guy like Drinkwitz, or what Spurrier said of, listen, it may not be perfect. It's not going to be, for the control freak coaches. They may not get a chance to just sort of micromanage every detail like they're used to, but getting together on August 5th, playing a game on September the 7th, whatever else, getting a month to get as ready as you can to play a game. It may not be a perfect scenario, but look around. The world's not perfect these days. I think coaches like that, we've got to really pat on the back and compliment. I hope that Kirby Smart takes a page from those guys' books and just says, hey, one way or another, we're going to do the best we can with the situation. Some coaches are going to do the opposite of that. We've already seen some of this well, listen, if we're not back working by the beginning of July, we can't play a game. Says you. And, that's Brian Kelly's line. That's other people's lines. You see some of this in the NFL of, oh, I don't know. This is tough. I don't care about what inconveniences you right now. I care about getting some version of football back on the field as soon as we possibly can. And once the world hopefully gets back to a healthier footing, finding a way to make that happen, more so taken care of along with that there as well. Oh, yeah. Joe Moody does bring a pretty good point that when it comes to like the Facebook, YouTube battle over here, that we have, frequent YouTube viewers like Chris Milton, people like that if you're going to do the true battle, there is some pretty high-powered playing wide receiver for the Facebook team, stuff like that. So there is a little bit more celebrity wattage, I guess, in the Facebook side of things. For sure. For T8 says, give me anything. And this is one of those years. And if things start getting back to normal and a more normal football takes hold, I'll feel a little bit less like saying this. But for now, I'm more concerned about Georgia playing a game than I am Georgia winning a national championship. A lot of the comments and the content on the show will still be directed towards how Georgia wins the ultimate prize and how it gets it done. But ultimately, I'm more concerned with the path towards playing again than I am the path towards, well, once you are playing, how do you win a championship? Just playing games in some form or fashion. I mean, just keep it to our state here for a moment. Our state's going into a lockdown period for the next couple of weeks, and schools are now done for the rest of the year. Senior year's over without a chance to really say goodbye. There's a lot of sadness in our state, and as the health situation moves its way through, there's going to be even more of that. we're going to really need football. The job of these coaches, the jobs of these players are going to be more important than it's ever been before, to just make us feel united as a society again after we're now literally not allowed to even see each other face to face. So we need football more than ever. And just the act of playing the games this year is going to be so important, no matter what the results are. Yeah, somebody brought up a pretty good point here. Let me see if I can get back to find this comment. It's disappeared now, but somebody in the Facebook comment section said that with WrestleMania this weekend, there won't be the version of clean old-fashioned hate. And I actually wrote about this at the site a couple of weeks ago, the fact that former UGA guy Bill Goldberg was set to go up against former Tech guy, used to be known as, his name is Joe Anoa'i, but he's a wrestler known as Roman Reigns. They were supposed to wrestle at WrestleMania, but now they're not. Reigns, Anoa'i, is he's battled cancer, and so because of the cancer that he's dealt with, that makes him more vulnerable to the coronavirus. And so from that standpoint, he's not competing right now, or performing, whatever you want to call it. He's not doing that. So that's actually a serious, real storyline to go along with something that's typically obviously not real. But in this case, Reigns' condition is real, and because of that, he's not able to perform as a wrestler. The whole thing is weird. I said this on the broadcast yesterday. When I first started watching the wrestling with no fans, it was kind of just unique and different, and it did kind of remind me of some of what y'all said before, the old NWA tapings that used to take place down at TBS Studios. It kind of reminded me of that to begin with, but now it's just kind of gotten weird. It's just, I'm glad they're still trying to put the product out, but the idea of fanless wrestling has just gotten very, very weird. Memphis Dog says I'm showing too much Facebook love. I apologize if it comes that way. Skull Ready, who I believe is not a UGA fan, says Georgia's going to realize that first anything, you won't be your best, and you guys' defense was good, but y'all already had coordinator that was number one, but I bet y'all won't be number one again. So I believe what he's saying is that the Georgia defense will suffer because of the layoff. Here's ultimately what I think all the teams are fine. And this is Georgia, this is Ohio State, this is Clemson, this is Alabama, this is LSU. And really that category of team in terms of an overall just measurable talent standpoint. When we start playing games, if we assume, let's just assume for scenario that, let's say that's what happens. If that's indeed the way that it goes down, then certain players are not going to be in great shape. And which is going to be all the more important to have a lot of guys you can rotate in and out. One of the things about Kirby Smart that I'll admit sometimes drives me crazy, but also has a lot of value is Smart plays a ton of players, So the next time you go to a youth league game and the coach plays the same 7 players all game long or whatever else, just remember Kirby Smart does not do that. Kirby Smart plays 30 guys, close to 30 guys, a lot on defense. He plays 20-something, almost an even number of snaps. And there's a huge rotation going on there. On the offensive side of the ball, sometimes I get frustrated by what I think is of a lack of continuity because you got 3 receivers running on and off every single play. But ultimately, that's getting a lot of experience for a lot of guys, which obviously keeps the buy-in to the program relatively high. But the other thing that it does is it just has a good number of players who are sort of game ready and ready to go. That philosophy, if we are dealing with a scenario where, not everyone's in the same perfect condition they're typically in, that philosophy could really benefit Georgia come September. And just the act of having more players that you can play, Georgia along with the teams I mentioned before, the Clemsons, the Ohio States, the LSUs, the Alabamas, to a lesser degree, the Auburns, the Floridas. At that point in time, just having more capable bodies you can advantage, I think is going to be more magnified once these games start being played. Let me give a quick shout out to my friends at Meriwether and Tharp. Of course, they are your source for Georgia divorce. Divorce is a reality. Unfortunately, during these times of life and the stress that we deal with because of questionable work situations, questionable health situations, the reality is that that's all made tougher on a relationship. And sometimes relationships that are already strained, the extra weight of worrying about your professional life or worrying about your health situation, sometimes that puts an extra weight that causes the strained relationships to just snap. And we don't like that to be true. We wish life could be different than that, but we are forced to deal with life as it is. And for some of you, you may be finding yourself on the heels of going through a divorce. Or maybe for some of you, it's already been decided that's going to happen, and now you're wondering what to do next. Here is the best advice I can give you. And I say this as someone that values the time. We get a chance to speak to each other on this broadcast each and every day. You need someone by your side to help you. You need someone who has a great deal of experience going through this. That's what my friends at Meriwether and Tharp do. Bob, Jason, the whole team over there. They're just really good at laying out a plan for you to get back to normal, to make your life whole again. All the different ways in which that's required in order for that to be true. They can be your advocate. So you've got to reach out to them for that initial consultation. Your source for Georgia divorce is Meriwether and Tharp. Find them online at theatlantadivorceteam.com. That's theatlantadivorceteam.com. That'll get you in touch with my friends at Meriwether and Tharp. Bob Garrison says they should have delayed WrestleMania. I know there's a lot of pocket of wrestling fans who really think that's true. That should have been the case. And I guess I can't really say one way or another. You know, you got two wrestlers touching each other. You don't really have a whole lot of other people in the building, I think, going on. I don't know. I mean, like the golf thing that's about to go down, it seems pretty likely we're about to see an announcement that it's Tiger Woods and Peyton Manning versus Phil Mickelson and Tom Brady. Is that the pairings? That's going to take place. So yeah, should wrestling be doing its thing? I guess I'm not smart enough to say one way or another. Kathy Aquavia Green, good to see you over here on Facebook. Football fan says, I don't know what's entertaining about golf. Yeah, I realize that golf's not everybody's cup of tea. I am a big fan. And as I've said before, golf is like one of the very few sports that I think is actually, in some cases, made better without fans. Now, the Masters is the one obvious difference here, where the Roars from Augusta have kind of made that tournament special and what it is, and the Phoenix Open to a degree as well. But overall, I think you get a better appreciation for the golf course because of the lack of fans. And one thing that, if you're not a huge golfing fan, I realize is those big galleries that pack the famous golfers, they actually knock down a lot of shots, a lot of errant shots. Don't go as far off course as they could because of the fans. And if you really watch a lot of golf, you'll notice this. As I touch my face again, one of the things that has become popular in golf lately is this like backboarding type thing. It's almost like playing putt-putt. The ball goes below the where the seats are, the wall in front of those seats. Think about like an outfield wall here for a moment. It smacks off that wall and bounces back towards the green. It's easier to control your shot that way. Next time you're watching some regular PGA Tour, if you see some replays from these PGA Tour events, there's a lot of backboarding that seemingly has gone on lately. You see some of this in the ladies' game there as well, too. All right, a few more posts. Dixie Normus says that he met Newman many times. So he's met Jamie Newman before. So good to see you on that front. Let's see what else is going on here. William Gleaton says we're going to beat people with a number of good players. Yeah, that extra talent level is going to be really important there. It's going to be really here. Oh, yeah, Rodney Manning mentions the sad story. So apparently Ed Orgeron's getting a divorce. I've seen a lot of news reports about that there as well. And, yeah, Mike D's laughing at me now. But so, yeah, Orgeron's getting a divorce. And that's sad to see. I hate that for him. What's funny about the thing with Orgeron is that his wife was always so prominent, like with him. Like a lot of his post-game interviews on the field, she would be standing there next to him for that. So it's kind of funny that, at least, I mean, you can't judge anything from seeing people on television, but she was certainly pretty present around him. So sad to see that's kind of coming to an end there. I hate that. Light Dog 1968. Thanks for the kind words, and I put it right back on you. I appreciate y'all being here, giving me a chance to do this. You have no idea how good it is for me to kind of have a sense of normalcy again, kind of getting back to normal. I'm just really, really glad to be able to do that. I love the football conversation we're able to have. And obviously you can't completely ignore what's going on in the world, but honestly, it's not my place to solve those problems. I'm just trying to figure out how to get some football back on the field. Blake Eckel says, have you been hitting the links during this debacle? What's your handicap? So, like, I'm not good. I'm whatever the highest handicap is, that's what I would be. But here's the way that I have been sort of scratching my golf itch. I took a piece of AstroTurf and I nailed it to, like, so in my front yard, I have a tree. If you have a lot of times you have like a big tree, a lot of grass doesn't grow well underneath, especially if the roots are big and they kind of come up towards the surface. So I've got like a bald spot sort of underneath this tree in front of where the shrubbery is in our front yard. And so I nailed a piece of AstroTurf. I don't leave it there. I'll pull it back up, but put a little piece of AstroTurf down there and I'll hit those little plastic soft golf balls into the cul-de-sac, which is always kind of a surprise for a car that randomly drives up. But that's what we've been kind of doing to get a little golf fix in is we've been hitting some light sort of, they're just, it's almost like a wiffle, like almost like golf version of wiffle balls, which by the way makes for a great wiffle ball home run derby as well. We do a lot of that kind of stuff around here, but those little tiny golf balls, plastic things off AstroTurf. I use a real club, but the balls themselves just don't go anywhere. So, Steve Shaffini, thanks for the kind words. I appreciate that, and good to see you checking in here today. Kevin Chapman says, I make great shots often enough to make me think I can get better. Yeah, so here's my thing with golf. Short irons, things like that, I'm okay. The more you get the long irons or the bigger clubs, that's where my game goes awry. That's what I've got to work on. If I could just keep the longer shots in bounds a little bit more, my score would improve greatly. Christian Joseph Polniak on Facebook says, is Georgia going to have a good wideout game next year? Maybe as good as LSU? I think this is a really good question. Unfortunately, one of the things you have to deal with just from a practical reality standpoint is the same way in which limited experience hurt Georgia last season. When you look at this upcoming year, as measured by returning production, Georgia's still pretty limited in that regard. You would say, well, they got George Pickens, and they do. But, you lose Lawrence Cage, or you lose a lot of these guys. And a lot of the guys who are coming back didn't have a ton of catches last year. So if you're measuring on the basis of returning production, even for this upcoming year, Georgia still doesn't have a lot of that. So I think the process of getting the program on a better footing from a wide receiver standpoint is just going to be a little bit of a slow grind. I expect Pickens to have a very good year. I assume that Dominic Blaylock's going to be healthy. I expect him to have a really good year. But then when you start trying to round out your top four, your top five guys, whatever else, that's still a little bit of a slow process. So Georgia better at receiver than it was a year ago? Yes. Dramatically better than it was a year ago? I think we got to still play the wait and see game on that. I mean, this is what I kind of got into with Mike yesterday on the podcast. My attitude on where Georgia is right now is pretty well the same thing it was at the beginning of last season. Can you be explosive offensively? Can you create negative plays defensively? If you can do both those things, then Georgia's a national champion. If you fail in either one of those regards, you may come up just short. Georgia was not explosive enough last year, and the lack of experience and lack of production in the receiver position is one of the reasons why. Do I feel great about that being way better this upcoming year? I don't know. That's why there's a lot of pressure on Todd Monken to design an offense that gets guys open. There's a really good article in ESPN today about the ways in which Alabama has utilized short throws in the Tua Tagovailoa era, probably more so than you realize. Tua throwing a lot of passes where the pass was completed behind the line of scrimmage. You think of Tua as a great deep ball thrower, and he was, but a huge number of his yards came on these short throws. For whatever reason, Georgia hasn't quite found that same success with the short throws. I think it's because a lot of defensive backs felt very comfortable just jamming UGA at the line of scrimmage because they didn't have to worry about having a guy run past them. Whatever the diagnosis is, just kind of has been the case. It has not, has not been going on. So from that standpoint, I do think it's still a process that's not going to go as quick as maybe some people want it to be. Christy says, have you heard any chatter about Fromm and the Bears? That's an interesting potential matchup there, but I have not really heard about that. It's amazing how all over the place Fromm kind of is in terms of his draft projection. You've seen some relatively unfavorable picks for Fromm. I know that Daniel Jeremiah has come out recently and kind of made a case for Fromm maybe going in the top 50. So it's kind of interesting to see how all over the place the projections for Jake are right now. Football fan says that's because Georgia's running team, Alabama's a passing team, totally different schemes, horrible comparison. But it's not a horrible comparison in football because if Georgia doesn't start passing the ball a little bit more, then the results are never going to be better than they were last season. I mean, this is the thing. I mean, like, we saw what being a running team got Georgia. Came up short in 2018, came up short again in 2019. I'm not saying that you give up on the run. I'm not saying that you lose your physicality. You hope not to be able to do that. But what eventually happened to Georgia was, once it didn't have a passing game to complement its running game, the running game alone was just not enough. It became way too easy to defend Georgia last year. It did. So you have to be a little bit more like Alabama. You don't want to be just like them necessarily, because I think Alabama became too finesse-oriented, not physical enough. But you got to be a little bit more like that. You know, I mean, show me a team that's won the national championship in the last however many years that didn't have a pretty potent passing attack. Frank Patterson says, who's going to have the bigger year? Is it Landers or Demetrius Robertson? He says, I think the Sugar Bowl turned the corner for Matt. I'll tell you this. Here's what was interesting for me, Frank, about the Sugar Bowl. Matt Landers is incredibly popular with his Georgia teammates. Incredibly popular. And I'll give you, for instance, on this. And I think the video is probably, I think the whole video is up. I talked to Monty Rice at the end of the game last year. And, of course, I'm asking a question about Pickens because that's just kind of what I do. But in the midst of talking about Pickens, Rice, unsolicited, started talking about Matt Landers. And if you want to go back to, like, say, the draft process of 2018, when Riley Ridley and McCole Hardman and all those guys were there, they kind of talked up Landers. These Georgia players that I saw in the locker room post-game of the Sugar Bowl were so happy that he caught a touchdown. They were so happy for him. And so, obviously, the players know each other better than any of us could ever know them. They just around each other a lot more. They just know each other. So if you're thinking about the possibility of Landers, as you said, using the Sugar Bowl as a springboard to break out, maybe that'll happen, maybe it won't. Certainly, Georgia's given Landers a lot of opportunities. And let's face it, if we're going to be honest here for a moment, Landers drew a lot of criticism from Georgia fans. But if you're interested in what the players thought, the players really, really, to my eyes anyway, what I've observed with my own eyes, the players were really happy for Landers in a way that sort of goes above and beyond just being happy that they won the game. Landers is a seemingly very popular guy with his teammates. If you're asking me, D-Rob versus Landers, I'm obviously going to pick D-Rob because for 2 years now, more than 2 years, I've kind of made a little bit of an argument for Robertson. I think Robertson's a very interesting talent. I've said a lot about D-Rob. So if you give me the choice between D-Rob and Landers, I'm going to stick with my guns on that. I've kind of made a case for D-Rob now for a couple of years, and I think because of his speed, he can eventually have a really good season at Georgia. But players, man, they really like Landers. At least they seem to, based on some of the circumstantial evidence that I've noticed. Football fan says he thinks that Burrow will be exposed in the NFL. Yeah, I'm not super high on really any of these quarterbacks. I've said before that I don't think that Joe Burrow or Tua Tagovailoa are going to be great quarterbacks by NFL standards. They may be starters. They may go on to have, long careers or whatever. But beyond just myth, I wouldn't trust Burrow or Tagovailoa in that regard for different reasons. In Burrow's case, I think he was really partially made by a superior scheme this past year. Almost the same talent in 2018, good but not great results. 2019, record-setting, historic offense. What changed? The presence of Joe Brady. Brady's now the coordinator of the Carolina Panthers. In the NFL, it's sort of hard to have that same impact, but I believe that Brady was the real star of LSU's team a year ago, and therefore I'd sell on the notion of Joe Burrow being a, at whatever level of quarterback you think of as great, I would sell on the notion of Burrow being that. For a different reason, I'd also sell on Tagovailoa being that. I do think he's fragile. I think that's a problem. But I think a lot of his success at Alabama, I mentioned the Alabama receivers a moment ago, I think one of the things we don't give enough credit to is just how good those – so this is a pretty deep crop of receivers for this year's draft, and 2 of the 3 best both played at Alabama, and you can make a case that for different reasons, Devontae Smith and Jalen Waddle had better years last year than Ruggs and Judy did. This is an incredibly, incredibly deep crop, or has been an incredibly deep crop of Alabama receivers. Tagovailoa, when healthy, has benefited from that. And that kind of talent advantage when he plays in the NFL, he's not going to have that. So the scouts and the people like Trent Dilfer and the quarterback whisperers, they love Tua. I think he's good, not great at the NFL level, and that's his ceiling. There's a chance he's even worse than that. But I don't personally think of Tagovailoa or Burrow as elite quarterbacks in the NFL. Richard Johnson says our wideout core is young. And yeah, George's obviously done some good recruiting work the last couple of years. So it's young now, but as it gets more experience, it's going to be both talented and experienced, and also a good bit deeper. I mean, if you want to go back prior to the 2019 class when Blaylock and Pickens comes in, it's really pretty eye-opening how ineffective Georgia had been at recruiting receivers. It's amazing. We think of Georgia as this like machine pumping out these 4- and 5-star players, but man, there were lots of examples going back then of Georgia just not really doing that, not really bringing in those elite kind of top 10 guys at that position, top 100 players in the country. There was not a ton of that. So Georgia's doing a better job in that regard right now. Let me give a quick shout out to my friends at Marlowe's. Of course, told you, I've picked up some to-go food from Marlowe's lately. They've always had a portion of their business dedicated to serving to-go customers anyway, and they've really stepped up their game right now. When I picked up some food the other day, it was a complete no-touch experience, right? Food was sitting there for me. I was able to, walk out with it. Didn't have to touch any other human being or anything like that. Really, really clean process, really hygienic process, and I really walked out of there, feeling like I'd had a great experience. I didn't even have to go into the restaurant. I was like right there in their patio off to the side. So as you're thinking about supporting the restaurants in your neighborhood, Marlowe's Tavern's a great option there because they've done so many things for their local communities, and this is a great chance for us to do something for them and enjoy some good food at home. By the way, also, between now and April 15th, when you buy a gift card, whether if you enjoy yourself or maybe you give this as a gift to somebody else, Marlowe's is going to add 20% to that gift card order. If you want to find out more about this or make your order, you can use the email address info@marlowestavern.com. That's info@marlowestavern.com. All right, let's do a couple of others here for a moment. By the way, I got drawn off sides by a YouTuber a little earlier in terms of I'm usually pretty good at noticing the names and knowing what to read and knowing what not to read. I got drawn off sides by a YouTuber a moment ago. I'm a little disappointed about that. Normally I'm better on that front than that. But nonetheless, let's do a couple more and we'll get ready to get out of here. Randy Hall says, where's Eddie today? Eddie is right here. He's doing good. Eddie's right here, doing really, really well. Steve Schiavini always has very funny comments. Always funny comments. John Arena says he's excited about the incoming receivers. Yeah, listen, Georgia's recruited a really good crop of them, and they all have different things that they do well, right? I mean, Rosemead to me is kind of the complete polished receiver. Jermaine Burton is the really dazzling athlete. Justin Robinson's a guy that has shown on a physicality, a guy that shows some strength, a guy that benefited from getting to go through those Sugar Bowl practices. Georgia's got a good crop of receivers coming in for sure. Randy Hall, speaking of Burton and Robinson, be seasoned by the end of the season? Yeah, they surely will be. They surely will be. Matt Talley said about being a GM, having to draft one of these guys and give them millions of dollars. Yeah, I mean, when you look at these teams that have had success with quarterbacks on small rookie-style contracts, they're the ones that have really done well. I mean, it's one of the reasons why I would argue against making Dak Prescott a franchise-level quarterback at the $30 million a year range. Dallas has benefited from having a cheap quarterback. Prescott's not been making tons of money, which gives you money to spend elsewhere. When the Seattle Seahawks were at their best, they also had a inexpensive quarterback on a rookie deal. That was Russell Wilson at the time. Now, eventually, Wilson was obviously worth the money. You had to pay him. But I think one of the underrated aspects of success in the NFL is finding a diamond-in-the-rough quarterback who you don't have to spend a lot of money on early so you can spend that money other places. I think that's true. Billy Hurley, thank you for the kind words. I really appreciate that. Matt Talley offering an evaluation of Matt Landers. And, yeah, listen, I mean, I think Landers would be the first to tell you it was not a great season for him a year ago. I think so. Eric DeVorncy Sr. mentioning Rick Gilbert, the person we're going to miss the most. Yeah, I think that I agree with you. I think that Gilbert's going to be a beast in college. I would love for Georgia to be able to get him for sure. Johnny Lester says that's preview the SEC East, subtracting the seniors and adding – hold on here. Subtracting the seniors and adding the freshmen, every team is 25% different. You got second, third, fourth in the East. So obviously, it's tough to make a case for someone other than Florida finishing second. I think that Tennessee thinks of itself as a program on the rise, and I do think that Tennessee's doing some things to challenge Florida right now. The one thing to be careful with the Vols, though, in terms of picking them to finish third, is that while the second half of last season would kind of argue for an obvious turnaround for Tennessee, I think you've got to factor in all the recent years in terms of the challenge of being way better this upcoming year. In other words, people look at Tennessee and say, well, they're guaranteed 9 wins, whatever else, because of the step they took forward last year. Taking that next step on that next season is not necessarily all that easy. The one thing that makes Tennessee really dangerous is the offensive line. When you look at the offensive linemen they'll be playing, even if Cade Mays is not eligible, not assuming that he probably won't be, but there's a lot of talent on that Tennessee offensive line. Some of it's recruited talent, some of it's transfer talent, some of it's whatever else. There's a good bit of talent on that Tennessee offensive line, and that is a formidable issue when you face the Vols. You will spend a lot of time talking about how to deal with that offensive line when you take them on. The one team in the SEC East that I think has a chance to be a real surprise, and that's South Carolina. Carolina obviously beat Georgia a year ago, but lost a lot of other games. I think it was 4-8, is that right? But if you go back and look at a lot of those losses, a lot of those were close losses, games that could have gone the other way. And I just have a sneaking suspicion that a team like that loses a bunch one way has a chance to bounce back the following year, especially given the motivation of Will Muschamp, knowing that he's likely coaching for his job. And I'm a big believer in Mike Bobo. I think that Bobo can make a difference. And so from that standpoint, I think the South Carolina is a little bit dangerous, a team worth paying attention to. By the way, all of this is a part of our R.S. Andrews cool down. Air conditioning systems working these days. It's hot outside. It was already warm this morning when I was outside. R.S. Andrews, a really good thing about when it comes to that. They can get your system back to factory fresh specs if it's not working, but you got to find them online at rsandrews.com. Also, water heater goes out. In many cases, R.S. Andrews can replace that same day. Story after story, they've been delivering smiles. And they can deliver smiles for you as well, but you got to find them online at rsandrews.com. We'll get ready to do our Gator Hater Updater here in a moment as I get the new number on the board here. Try to make this look somewhat nice, my ugly handwriting. We'll do our Gator Hater Updater in just a little bit. James Wade says, I won't be surprised if Georgia beats Florida again. James, I believe, is an LSU fan, so that's a nice compliment from a Tiger there for the dogs on that. And obviously, that's what UG fans are hoping for. All right, that's a good question. Green Soldier says, other than Florida, that's the biggest challenge for Georgia this season. Record on this. Just because the game is at home and just because Georgia has enjoyed a lot of success against the players, please don't discount the Auburn game. New date for that in October. Auburn game is one you got to pay close attention to. I think you got to pay close attention to that Auburn game. No, do I expect Georgia to win it? Obviously, I do. But that's not be a tough, hard-fought game once again. Older. This is an Auburn team that beat Alabama at the end of the regular season. So I think you've still got to respect Auburn as an opponent here. Philip Jordan Wells says, to kind of borrow is it Alice Cooper who's saying school's out forever? Yeah, it sort of feels that way these days, doesn't it? Sort of feels that way. Football fan says Auburn should have beaten LSU if it wasn't for the refs last season. Litvy Georgia UGA says I'm looking good with the beard. Thanks for the kind words on that. I appreciate that. We're going to get ready to go here in just a moment. Let me remind you, Gator Hater Updater. Now been 1,251 days since those lousy, stinking Gators are beating the Georgia Bulldogs. Let's get this on display here on both YouTube and on Facebook. 1,251 days. Appreciate all of that. By the way, don't forget that a good Georgia fan is a Gator Hater first and foremost. That's what our buddy Eddie wants you to know. He wants you to know that. Anything else we want to hit before we get out of here? I'm running a little bit late. I got a podcast to go on the air here pretty soon. Anything else? Let me see if there's anything else over here I got to mention with y'all. Looks like we've pretty well taken care of all our business. Thanks as well to to our friends at Meriwether and Tharp making this possible as well. They're great friends of us here at DawgNation. They are your source for Georgia divorce. You can find them online at it's time to end the show because I'm messing stuff up here. At theatlantadivorceteam.com. Theatlantadivorceteam.com. Time to do that. By the way, as James Wade notices, the 1,251 days, we said before, in the unlikely event there is no cocktail party, the numbers will keep counting for the Gatorade updater. We've already decided that continues to happen. Raymond Cox says Auburn, really tough game for Georgia. He says Malzahn's still the coach, therefore dogs by 30. Well, there you go. Raymond Cox weighing in strong on that. All right, we're gonna go. Have a great day. Thanks for being here on DawgNation Daily, presented by Meriwether and Tharp. Hope all of you stay healthy. Wash your hands. Stay indoors for a little while if you can. Let's try to get our state back on good, firm footing again. So we'll be playing some football this September. We will see y'all then tomorrow, 10 a.m. DawgNation Daily, presented by Meriwether and Tharp. Have a great day, everybody.